Cop drives woman to work, but that's the last time he'd give her a lift. While walking to work one day, Jaylesya noticed a car in her peripheral vision. She tried to ignore it, keeping her eyes forward and quickening her pace. She offered up a silent prayer that this wouldn't become a big deal and that the car would just pass by. However, the car continued to draw closer and suddenly she heard it honk. She instinctively turned to look at the car. That's when she noticed that it was a police car. The officer stepped out of the car. She didn't know what was going on, but it would become clear in a moment. Sergeant Scott Bass works for the Nash County Sheriff's Office. He'd been driving around in his patrol car, scanning all the faces on the road. He was looking for someone specific and he had an idea where they might be. He eventually decided to drive past the Stone Gate mobile home community, knowing that this was a likely place to find the person. He continued scanning all the faces around him. Finally, he sees a familiar figure pulling up next to them and honked. Jaylesya Corbett was on her way to Bojangles, making her way through the bad weather. It was raining hard and the icy wind was blowing viciously. In an attempt to deal with the weather, she pulled out her umbrella, but the wind tore it from her hands. She sighed, trying to huddle in a way that would help her stay warm and dry and continued on. She trudged through the stinging rain, trying to step over all the puddles. She sighed when she heard the car honk. Being stopped by a cop was the last thing she needed. Jaylesya stood there, exhausted. Despite all her efforts, her shoes and feet were soaked. To top it off, her feet were killing her, and even though she had worn her most comfortable sneakers, her blisters were getting rubbed raw. She had to get to Bojangles every day, battling her way through the cold and bad weather when needed. She had to go on foot and it was quite a long trip. All in all the trip was a 12-mile round trip. However, the day the policeman stopped her would change everything. Sergeant Bass finally spotted her. Drawing her attention. He watched her sag as she saw it was a police vehicle. He motioned for her to approach the car. He had a bone to pick with her and he had finally found her. Jaylesya shuddered as she saw him roll down his window. She resignedly approached the car. She knew she had been caught. She could no longer ignore it and there was no use running. She felt her head swim as she knew she was in trouble and there was no way out. She nervously approached the car with the word Sheriff, Nash County written on the side of the car. She gathered up her courage as she approached the open window. She steeled herself for what she expected to hear. His words kept replaying in her brain. It was so unexpected, however, that it took her brain some time to completely make sense of what he was saying. Her eyes grew wide as she finally started to comprehend what she had heard. Once he had her attention, Sergeant Bass told her to get into the vehicle. At first, she tried to protest, however, Sergeant Bass insisted. He told her again that she needed to get into the car because she shouldn't be on the street. She spluttered out a protest. She tried to explain that she couldn't waste time because she needed to get to work. It was her livelihood and her family depended on it. However, she knew that arguing with the police would not be a wise choice. She sat there in silence. She had no idea what was going on or where he was taking her. She was nervous, lacing her fingers together and placing them on her chest. Realizing how nervous she appeared, she placed her hands in her lap. She sat wondering what was actually happening. Was she being taken in for questioning? Why wasn't he saying anything? The suspense was driving her nuts. However, when she looked at him he was simply driving, eyes fixed on the road. No clues there. The entire situation and left Jaylesya feeling very uncomfortable. Even though he was a cop, she realized that she had simply complied and gotten into a stranger's car when told to. She knew that was not a smart idea. She thought about what she could have done. Could she have run? Maybe she'd get away. Even though he was a cop, she didn't know him and had no idea whether she could trust him. That's when they reached their destination. The Bojangles sign loomed over them. While he was commuting to the sheriff's office of Nash County, Sergeant Scott Bass had noticed that Jaylesya was wearing a Bojangles uniform and had realized with dismay that she had been making the 12-mile journey on foot to her work every day. That's when he decided to give her a lift. Nobody, he thought, should have to walk in such bad weather. But his kindness wasn't about to end there. Sergeant Scott Bass continued to give Jaylesya lifts to work whenever the weather turned bitter and whenever she would allow it. It normally took her 2 hours to walk to Bojangles and 2 hours to walk back home each day, so she welcomed the gesture. Sergeant Bass was impressed with her perseverance and determined to do more. He hastily contacted the local Walmart to see if they could help. Then he did something that would change her life forever. Jaylesya waited in anticipation. Sergeant Bass had said that he wanted to meet with her and she was nervous. She thought that she was about to be reprimanded by the sergeant, although she hadn't the faintest idea what she had done. As she wondered, she saw him. He called her over and she didn't know what was about to happen. Then, he pulled something large from his car and presented it to her proudly. It was a brand new Schwinn Fairhaven women's cruiser bicycle. I wanted to help Jaylesya because she walks 6 miles to work every day, regardless of the temperature, rain or shine, stands on her feet during her entire shift, and walks 6 miles under the same conditions back to her home, and that is truly admirable. I've had the opportunity to get to know her and wanted somehow to lessen her burden of that 12-mile walk, Sergeant Bass recalled later. The video, posted by CBS 17 on YouTube, has since gained over 6,000 views and hundreds of comments in just a few weeks. The post that the Nash County Sheriff's Office posted on Facebook in commemoration of Sergeant Scott Bass's kindness has also been extremely well received by the community. They are proud to have such a generous member and are always ready to step up for people in need. I was shocked, Jaylesya said of the incredible gift. I didn't think it was real. She is extremely grateful that she doesn't have to make the arduous mile journey on foot anymore, thanks to the kindness of one man who was determined to help the people in his community. Would you have done the same?